Hello and welcome back. We know that the pandemic disrupted value chains around the world and accelerated the pace of their reconfiguration. In this next section, we will hear from a series of leaders across the IDB Group, as well as for two key partner organizations. Without further ado, allow me to introduce you to Fabrizio Perti, General Manager, Integration and Trade Sector, IDB, Gema Sacristan, Chief Investment Officer, IDB Invest, Laura Ripani, Chief Labor Markets and Social Security Division, IDB, Portia Wu, Managing Director, Public Policy, Microsoft, and John Drummond, Head of the Trade in Services Division, OECD. Fabrizio, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Maria Elena. Good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for joining us today to discuss concrete opportunities for collaboration with the Inter-American Development Bank, and in line, of course, with its Vision 2025. In this session, we're going to talk about one of the main elements of that vision, which is the topic of value chains and job creation. So I will now share a presentation, and then we will have a very interesting discussion on this. So I will start offering a brief overview of what we at the IDB Group see as an opportunity for the region in this process of reconfiguration of global value chains in order to boost investments, exports, and especially job creation. We will then have a very interesting discussion with our invited panelists to touch on how the IDB Group as a whole is supporting Latin America and the Caribbean countries in strengthening their position in these value chains, promoting more integration and creating more and better jobs. Let me begin with the premise, which I think it's very important, that in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, most, if not all, of the governments are facing tighter budgets and constraints. This is where foreign direct investment in this context of reconfiguration of value chains presents itself as a unique opportunity, and the private sector becomes a key actor for the region's economic recovery through greater investments and international commerce. Let's unpack what I just said, but by first taking a few moments to focus on global value chains themselves. For decades now, companies in search of greater efficiency began to relocate different parts of their production processes internationally. The continuous reduction in transport costs and the advancement of information and communication technologies have made it so that many goods that in the past were produced from start to finish in only one country are now produced in different stages in different countries. This is what we call the international fragmentation of production that localizes different stages in those different countries around the globe. The importance of global value chains is such that today the international trade that occurs through them reaches 50% of global trade, half of global trade. This is a very classic and illustrative example of this phenomenon through the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Up to 45 large companies located in more than 15 countries are involved in the construction of the main components of this airplane. And if the suppliers that supply nuts and bolts, electronic components, and software are considered, all those additional suppliers are considered, the number would exceed 100 companies. This also occurs in goods of less complexity, like in this case, tennis balls. As we can see in this example, to produce a tennis ball for the Wimbledon tournament, the miles traveled by its different inputs accumulate a total distance of more than 50,000 miles or 80,000 kilometers, with more than 10 countries participating in the production of this tennis ball. Participating in global value chains generates a myriad of benefits in terms of development that go beyond the traditional growth of just trade and investment. And in this slide, I will share a few. Global value chains have the potential to increase the productivity of countries, not only because they can specialize in sectors where they have or hold comparative advantages, but also because they can do so in certain stages of production of goods where they would otherwise not participate, generating additional trading benefits. Recent studies, for example, show that a 10% increase in the level of participation of a country in global value chains leads to an increase of 1.6 average labor productivity and from 11 to 14% of GDP per capita. So productivity and growth. They also allow countries to diversify both trade and production. Countries can participate in one or more of those stages of production of those value chains. In turn, they generate, of course, employment and more, and we like to say better jobs. There's vast empirical and evidence about this, that companies that participate in the global value chains demand more qualified personnel and also pay higher salaries. Those are associated with what I was saying before, with higher levels of productivity. That companies that only export or that do not trade at all. And finally, participating in this allows the transfer of technology and the diffusion of knowledge from the leading global companies to different links in the chain, and can lead, under certain conditions, to an upgrading in the type of activities that are developed in the local economy. This is what we always yearn for. I'm here in Paraguay right now on travel mission, talking exactly about this, how the country can upgrade its position in its international insertion and value chains. So how is the region faring? I want to point out that the region intra-regional trade is very low compared to other regions of the world. In fact, it has decreased in recent years and remains below 15%, while in Europe, it reaches almost 60. In Asia, it's more than 40. The region is also lagging in terms of its participation and its value added in value chains. The number of companies in Latin America and the Caribbean that are part of this phenomena is low compared to other regions. And this participate mostly in the initial stages, exporting raw materials or derivatives that are later processed or re-exported from third countries. That happens particularly in South America. In Mexico and some Central American countries, there are more companies that participate via the incorporation of imported intermediate goods for processing and export. So the factors that affect our participation in this low participation in value chains. In first case, there are restrictive trade policies that remain in place that we're working to overcome, but they're still there, as well as the existence of a highly fragmented network of the preferential trade agreements we have. We have many agreements, but they don't converge sufficiently. The region also continues to face higher transportation and logistics costs than our counterparts in Asia, Europe, and North America. There is a digital infrastructure gap, which is increasingly important for export of high value added services that is also affecting the productivity of companies. Then there are the information costs that continue to be a barrier for those companies that export. and the limited access to financing is also an obstacle. Then there are cross-cutting factors related to institutions, to the mismatch of human capital, which we will be talking about in this panel, and the technological capacities of the local companies as well. So now let's talk about the context and especially the opportunity for our region. Global value chains are shortening in order to increase resilience and agility, and especially to reduce disruption risks and time to markets, motivating companies to rethink their production schemes. This has been motivated by multiple factors, amongst which is the COVID-19 pandemic undoubtedly led to this rethink for resiliency purposes and risk diversification. Reducing the carbon footprint is now a priority of businesses and consumers alike, through shorter distances, of course. Advanced countries have an increasing interest as well to safeguard the provision of strategic inputs in certain sectors, such as semiconductors and rare earths in the case of the United States. In terms of the opportunities, we see that the large multinational companies are seeking to secure suppliers from location closer to the end markets. We believe that this clearly creates an opportunity for our region to increase our participation in these value chains, especially in strengthening our regional value chains. And I'd like to illustrate with some examples, because it's good to talk about the theory, but it's more important to talk about the practice. Nike, for example, has reached an agreement with the company Tegra Global to advance the manufacture of sports apparel and footwear in Honduras to supply the US market. This is an investment in the order of 50 million. Intel recently announced a 350 million investment in Costa Rica for microprocessor assembly and testing. Jamaica has attracted global companies such as Sutherland Global, Xerox, Induja, and Alorica, creating more than 25,000 jobs. Uruguay, my country, has been the one chosen by Volkswagen Latin America to implement a testing phase for 100% electric cars. IBM opened a new cognitive transformation center in Bogota, its largest process transformation center for Latin America. All of this has occurred in the COVID-19 pandemic we're living. Motorcar has invested $300 million in a production facility in Tijuana, Mexico. And I could go for a good part of the afternoon with the examples. So what are we doing at the IDB, and how are we supporting our borrowing member countries to seize the opportunity? I will quickly end by serving this, which we find is a very important slide in terms of what we call our toolkit to support, our toolkit of instruments to support this agenda. We have set in motion an approach with three main stages, supported by this tailor-made toolkit of the IDB Group as a whole. The toolkit focuses on three key areas of intervention, what we've denominated the three I's of investment, infrastructure, and integration. In terms of investment, there's the investment promotion and financing needed to foster more employment throughout the region. In terms of the infrastructure that is needed to reduce those logistics and transportation costs, is there, and we're financing in terms of physical as well as the digital connectivity that is required to make this phenomenon happen. And then integration. We have to move towards the convergence and harmonization of trade agreements and regulation to improve the regional business environment. So this toolkit presents both financial instruments and non-financial instruments, which are mainly in the area of content and knowledge and promotion. We're elaborating national strategies that include the identification of sector-specific opportunities at the level of sectors and at the level of specific companies for each country analyzed, and as well as the identification of the pain points that will have to be overcome so that these opportunities are materialized. These opportunities won't materialize by themselves. Interventions have to be carried out to make them happen. We're working these strategies right now in 16 countries of our 26, and we want to cover the whole region this year. So we're very active, and this is leading to promotional events and fora, both virtual, increasingly hybrid, and hopefully in presence very soon, as well as projects, operations, the financing, both on the public sector side and for all of these activities that I was mentioning of trade promotion, of trade infrastructure, as well as the private sector side, which is the IDB Invest side, in terms of the financing of the companies. And that is what we're also going to talk about in this panel. So now, talking about the panel discussion, we believe it's a great moment to welcome my fellow panelists to start the discussion on how this agenda can materialize. So I welcome Gema Sagristan, my good friend, Chief Investment Officer of IDB Invest. Gema, good morning. And we want to now talk about private sector financing through IDB Invest, both to anchor companies as well as small and medium sized companies. Given that almost 90% of global trade depends on some type of financing, mainly in the short term, today more than ever, companies in Latin America and the Caribbean need to finance their trade operations to participate in these value chains. So what role is IDB Invest playing to narrow this trade finance gap, especially through its trade finance facilitation program? Welcome, Gema.
Thank you very much, Fabrizio. It's a real pleasure to stay with all of you today. As most of you already know, the world trade finance gap has increased in the recent years. In 2018, the gap was around $1.5 trillion, and last year, in the middle of the pandemic, it was $1.7 trillion, according to the last available information we have in the market. If we look at the numbers, around 23-25% of the total gap corresponds to the Americas, and within the Americas, the vast majority relates to Latin America and the Caribbean. So the gap is huge, and unfortunately, this gap affects more to developing countries for sure, and within the developing countries, even more to the smaller companies, which is a problem at the end if we think about the percentage or the contribution of these companies to the GDP of most of the developing economies nowadays. Supporting trade finance, both through banks and directly through the supply chain, is one of our strategic priorities at the IDB Group level. Actually, it's one of the 5 pillars of our strategy called Vision 2025, and we have developed several instruments in the recent years. One of our main products was developed quite a long time ago. Actually, it's called the Trade Finance Facilitation Program, the TFFP. It was initially launched 16 years ago, but we have updated to the recent situations to really be more efficient and to give more value added to our clients. Through this program, basically, we support financial intermediaries worldwide in trade finance. As of today, we have a network of 84 Latin American banks or Latin American financial intermediaries, and more than 100 financial intermediaries worldwide. Basically, the program offers guarantees and basically to cover the risk of the Latin American financial institutions, loans directly or bilaterally, and syndicated loans to banks in the region, and technical assistance to these banks to really develop products that help their clients in their local markets. So since we started operation, as I said, 16 years ago, we have developed or approved more than $4.5 billion in credit lines in 21 countries in the region. We have supported more than $12 billion in trade finance, and we have mobilized more than 1.75 billion of additional resources, joining efforts with other banks and financial intermediaries. Since we started operating, as I said, quite a long time ago already, we have received quite positive positive opinions from different kind of banks, but especially from the local banks, because we were able to open them several doors to a wider range of international banks, and we were able to support them with short-term but also medium and long-term resources, especially in hard currencies, in dollars, euros, yens, which are really important for trade finance. As you know, 2020 represents an special year for everyone, including for the banks in the regions, and we were able to support them in that tough years, increasing our available resources from $1.5 billion to $3 billion. We had an historic record in disbursement. We increased basically almost 60% in 2020 if we compare to the previous year, to 2019. And basically it's because we wanted to play a contra-cyclical role. So this has really shown us that even in the tough times, together, working together with both local financial institutions, but also local financial institutions, we were able to support importers and exporters, but especially the smaller companies, which are the ones that are needed the most. Thank you.
Thank you, Gemma. Congratulations on those numbers. We're more important when there are problems, and that's what you've done. So good work. John, welcome, Head of Trade and Services Division at the OECD. According to a recent 2021 OECD report, countries are exposed differently to foreign supply and demand shocks in global value chains. What does this mean for countries in Latin America and the Caribbean? What lessons can be learned in this sense from the COVID-19 crisis? Welcome again, John.
Okay, hello everybody. So problem, but I will try to.
Can't hear you very well. At least I can't.
Answer the question. Please let me know.
We may have to come back to John if we can, while we check the technical problem there, so that we don't interrupt the panel. That's what I suggest. So we now go to Laura while we solve the problem with John. Laura Ripani, Labor Markets Division Chief at IDB. Welcome. What opportunities, Laura, my good friend Laura, do you see in terms of employment opportunities due to these changes in value chains? Which sectors do you foresee growing? What type of talent should we develop in the region to increase the incentives for firms to invest and generate more jobs in our region?
Thank you, Fabricio, for your question, and thank you for having me today in this wonderful discussion panel. As you know, we have a labor market that is changing profoundly. We suffer the huge impact of COVID-19 on the labor markets in the region, with up to 31 million jobs lost in Latin America and the Caribbean during the worst part of the crisis in 2020. But we're also seeing the opening of new markets and new opportunities like the ones you presented in your presentation that emerge because of the reconfiguration of global value chains. For me, it is important to talk about the jobs that will open up because of these opportunities, but at the same time, analyze the type of skills required for these new jobs and prepare the talent of the region to be able to both attract new investment into Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as connect our region talent to global opportunities. And we also need to analyze the quality of jobs created, as well as strategies to connect the traditionally disconnected individuals to the labor market to access the emerging sectors. And you asked about the sectors that I see growing. We could mention opportunities for like in many sectors to expand our attraction of foreign investment, such as textile and shoes industries in countries in Central America, the expansion of the automobile industry in Mexico. But I would like to mention one particular industry that I think will be really important for many countries in the region, both in Latin America and in the Caribbean. And this is the global services industry. LAC can present an attractive package of characteristics that could increase their knowledge-based services exports. This package includes a combination of availability of skilled labor with competitive costs, proximity to the time zones of the US, and the existence of special economic zones in several countries. We are talking about opportunities in knowledge process outsourcing services, finance, process reengineering, architecture, design, engineering, development of applications, software and information technologies, establishment of shared service centers, data centers and the cloud, market and financial analysis and intelligence, R&D, education, health services, so many sectors that require high-level skills, socio-emotional skills, digital skills, medium-level skills, technical skills. So to make these promising opportunities in the global services sectors and other key sectors a reality for LAC, we need a big booster in skills development investments. We need to connect much better the needs of the market, analyzing skills demands, not only for the needs of the current employers, but also for the potential global employers. Secondly, we need to connect these needs with the training system, transforming the curricula and the certifications provided by the training system providers. And finally, as I mentioned before, we need to care about connecting the traditionally disconnected. So we have to have specific policies to guide individuals, men, women, young people to follow positive career trajectories with market value certifications and take advantage of these new opportunities that open up. So to wrap up this answer, I think it's crucial to take advantage of the opportunities offered by the reconfiguration of the global value chains, but we need to make sizable investments in the talent of the people in the region to make these promises a reality.
Thank you, Laura, and we're very happy to be doing many of those things together, as you know, yes. And we will continue to scale and grow. We now turn to Portia from Microsoft. Welcome, Portia. In your opinion, what are the skills of the future for a company like Microsoft? What approaches to skills infrastructure are essential for countries to spur growth, including through increasing entrepreneurship and attracting more investments?
Well, thank you, Fabrizio, and thank you to the whole IDB team. Really, we've enjoyed the partnership, the longstanding partnership between Microsoft and the IDB on so many issues, from artificial intelligence to digital government, entrepreneurship, digital skills. It's really a long and fruitful one, and we look forward to continuing it. You know, to follow on the comments that Laura made, I think this connectivity, the infrastructure we need involves, you know, digital connectivity, affordable devices, and the basic skills to use them. It is absolutely digital skills, digital skills, digital skills. And my own background is more in the United States, where before coming to Microsoft, I used to oversee the employment and training department of the United States government. But we see the same issues in the US and communities as we do in rural Guatemala, where we have partnerships. Just as many people are saying, maybe I can't afford a device, but then I don't know how to use it. Maybe I can do basic social media, but I don't know how to use the skills that employers are looking for. In the US, for example, we're seeing in our economy, 75% of jobs require some level of digital skills. Yet a third of workers cannot meet that most basic fundamental level. I'm comfortable filling out a form online, cutting and pasting with a mouse, highlighting documents. So I think this is what we're really seeing. And as we talk about these issues of shifting global value chains and increasing investments, for example, from the United States throughout the region in this hemisphere, employers are looking for those skills. They must have those digital skills. And I think the thing we need to focus on also is people need to be able to learn how to learn. The software of today may not be the software of next year. Employers are looking for individuals who can figure out how to learn new digital tools and are willing to keep changing and evolving. And that's why I think some of the work in entrepreneurship and some of the work we've done with IDB is so important, where we're working on a platform to connect LATAM women STEM entrepreneurs with other mentors and investors. Right? In that rapidly changing and innovating economy, opportunities are going to change. And so for individuals to have the opportunity to start a business and understand what sources of capital are available, understand how to use online tools to access that information, that's absolutely critical. To build on something Laura said too, also we have to think about the communities that have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. And we know how women's employment across the region has been impacted. And so thinking about opportunities for individuals at large employers, but also in starting their own business is absolutely critical.
Thank you so much, Portia. And those skills have to generate opportunities, as you say, for our population at large, for entrepreneurs and for women entrepreneurs. Talking about women, John left me alone with a panel full of women because his connection is not working well. We're still trying to connect our colleague from the OECD, but we'll have to jump to Gemma again for this second round of questions, in which I will ask you to keep it brief so that we can finish on time. But this is a very, very interesting discussion. So in addition to local and regional banks, how have the fintechs and digital finance solutions helped, especially the small and medium players, companies, overcome the trade finance shortfalls? And to what extent are businesses digitizing, doing their digital transformation to boost this growth and efficiencies? And in this case, what is the IDB best thinking in this area of financing solutions?
Thanks, Fabrizio. We really believe that the role of fintech companies in providing solutions for trade finance, especially for the financing of accounts payables and receivables, is really important and is gaining momentum. That's for sure. Technology and digitalization is allowing fintech bring a greater automation, visibility, and transparency to financial operations. And this is really important. And in most of the cases, it translates to the creation of operational efficiencies and a reduction of cost and risk, which, as all of us who work in financing, is really important. At the end, we reduce the risk, and through that, we are able to reduce the cost. these kind of efficiencies are allowing fintechs to really tap into different segments that are usually underserved by the traditional banking sector, especially the SMEs or even the MSMEs, the micro, small, and medium enterprising. So we have been working with several of these fintechs. In general, we have seen a growth of the importance and the creation of more and more fintech serving especially the financial inclusion area in the region. Very pleased to see that. And we've been working with some of them to really tap on trade finance, serving the smaller segments. We've been developing some capabilities and new products, especially on what we call reverse factoring. This is something that is new in the market. We are piloting this idea and taking that into scale already. We started a couple of years ago in Mexico. We consider Mexico as a lab for trade finance through technology or through fintechs. As you know, Mexico has been one of the pioneer countries in the world using reverse factoring, basically including MSMEs in the supply chain of the largest companies. This is what is called reverse factoring and discounting the accounts payable. So Mexico was or is one of the leaders in traditional reverse factoring. So basically, we use the country as a lab to test the use of fintechs in that product. Since then, since 2018, we have approved already 16 reverse factorings for an amount of around 600 million. And these lines basically support 12 big companies in Mexico and 4 regionals. Since then, we have supporting $1.4 billion in trade finance, especially, as I said, allowing the smaller companies to really get into the supply chain of the largest one. So just to summarize, we see a great opportunity using fintech to scale the business, to really be able to do it faster, to reduce risk and accordingly to reduce cost. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Gema, for all the innovation that we're doing on this area, which will only keep growing. Mm-hmm. So we now turn to Portia again. I know you have great expertise in the area of workforce development. So what changes are you seeing in the way we train individuals, and how do you think we should do it in the future in a way that adapts to the constantly changing demands, right, of the companies and the private sector, in things that will happen that we don't even know will happen in the near future? So what's your take on that, Portia?
Well, this is what's so exciting about the pandemic. You know, take the United States as an example. We used to say, oh, you need training? Go to a community college, but only go during the daytime and only start in September or January. Or you need services from the government or support for that training? Well, you have to drive to a brick building 200 miles away to get approved for those services. I think pandemic has blown all of that up. We realize that doesn't work. And frankly, for other countries that maybe didn't have that established infrastructure, I think there's a real opportunity here to rethink this. How can we reach people in a much more direct way? But here's the challenge. We say adults are going to have to do lifelong learning. Well, if I were in person with you now, I would say, how many of you have signed up for an online learning class? I'll raise my hand. How many of you never made it past the introductory session of that class? I've signed up for Introduction to Python probably 5 times and have never made it past the first session. And we have to recognize that individuals who are working full time, raising families, yet need more skills to advance as adults into better jobs and careers face a lot of challenges. So that means we need a couple key approaches. First of all, like I said earlier, digital skills is absolutely fundamental. And you can't reach people unless they have the connectivity infrastructure to allow them to take advantage of those online resources and also the skills to be able to use them. Two, we have to meet people where they are. A great example in the pandemic of a partnership Microsoft supported in El Paso, Texas, actually, where we worked with small businesses who suddenly needed to have an online presence. Pizza parlor, I need to sell my pizzas online now. We went in, they went to the business, showed them how to use a laptop, train the employees and the business owner. So it's training entrepreneurs and small business employees at the same time, because we know adults learn best in context. So learning at work and on the job is absolutely critical. And then finally, we have to assume, like in the example I just gave, people are going to fail. They're going to face challenges. And so in any training approach, we have to make sure we have additional supports there, whether that's affordable childcare so people can go to classes, multiple opportunities for people to go to complete courses and certifications, micro grants to help individuals overcome various barriers they may face. Maybe their device breaks, they need a new one. They can't afford transportation to their course. They can't afford childcare costs. So thinking about how we provide those multiple options and multiple vectors, online, in-person, supported, different options for people, meet them where they are. I think that's how we'll have success.
Thank you, Portia. It's extremely interesting. The learning by doing. I was raising my hand as well when you were asking the question, for sure. Being very pragmatic and engaging in these courses. Great potential, but the how is very important. Thanks so much for your tips and ideas. Laura, you now will close this very interesting panel. And I will ask you, what are the 3 actions you would recommend to a country that is willing to, wants to increase its foreign investment? What can they do in terms of labor and skills development policies to attract these opportunities?
Well, first of all, I am convinced, and I'm sure many countries are convinced as well, that to achieve sustainable and inclusive economic growth, employment recovery and employment transformation is central. At the same time, there is no recovery if we don't include women, as Portia was mentioning before. So the words employment and gender must go hand in hand. Policies that include this gender perspective are a very important part of the equation in this crisis. And the IDB Group, in fact, includes employment recovery with gender perspective as central in the Vision 2025. For that, your question regarding the 3 main actions for a country or recommendations, I will say 3 things. Countries should concentrate on firms, talent, and regulations. In terms of firms, we should provide incentives to local firms to create new jobs and for international firms to have incentives to invest and to create jobs in Latin America and the Caribbean. At the same time, improving access, as Hema was mentioning before, to financial instruments to increase the opportunities for entrepreneurs and firms to open up new businesses and to connect with global opportunities. Second, talent. It is crucial to invest heavily in a relevant training system, mapping skills needs and connecting the training services to these needs. At the same time, it's important to provide support to those who need it to access these relevant training opportunities. And here, Fabricio, as you know, we're working together in an example of this in Jamaica in the global services sector, upskilling and reskilling individuals to work in the sector, as well as promoting this sector to attract more investments. And third, regulations. I would recommend countries to invest time and effort in discussing public and private sectors, discussing, creating, and adjusting their existing labor and trade laws and regulations to adjust them to the needs of the 21st century. This crisis offers the opportunity to implement changes in regulations, both in trade and labor markets, to make our countries more attractive to foreign investment. And these changes are also necessary for an overall better functioning of the labor markets, but they are key to boost job creation, the increasing protection against risks, and also promote female labor force participation. So to finish overall, and my last message is that we really are in a pivotal moment for the labor markets in the region. This is a time that asks for big changes. And we need to work on the immediate response, but we also need to work on the structural labor market problems that were enhanced due to the crisis. Finally, we need to take advantage of all the learnings and the opportunities that the pandemic leaves us and create a better future for work. So thank you so much for your invitation, and it was great to be in this panel.
Thank you so much, Laura, for your very important observations. And in finishing, I would, like to say this is a multidisciplinary agenda to make these opportunities happen, to materialize. There are interventions in human capital, in innovation, in finance, in trade, in investment, in SMEs, in many of those elements that are there in our Vision 2025. That's why the IDB Group, we really think, believe strongly, we are the ideal actor with the private sector to make these opportunities happen, to contribute to this economic recovery in the region. So this is an IDB Partners Forum, and to all the private sector partners and the ones that want to join as partners, we are there to work together to make from this crisis an opportunity for a better Latin America and the Caribbean. Thanks to all my colleagues also at the IDB, ORP, KIC, and everyone that is carrying out these wonderful discussions, and hopefully will turn soon into actions. Have a great rest of week.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Fabricio. And let's move on to the next session.